I would not take much time. My time is limited, and we are already 8:26. So within 10 to 15 minutes, I would complete my certain propositions and contentions which I have to put forth. सबसे पहले तो गुरु पूर्णिमा के अवसर पे सभी विद्वत जनों को मेरा प्रणाम। मैं पिछले 2 दिनों से मुझे सौभाग्य मिला आप सभी लोगों को सुनने का, कुछ जिज्ञासाएं थी उनका भी समाधान करने का। आज मैं मूलतः 2 विषयों पे अपने विचार रखूंगा। The first one is the judicial response during COVID-19 crisis, whether it is a passivity or a deferral. So when I say this, then I have one peculiar thing to make, that the whole edifice of my talk would be centered on evaluating the approach of Supreme Court in particular and the approach of all the constitutional courts in general during this COVID-19 crisis. So if we begin, then in my views, there are 2 propositions which I must identify at the outset. The first proposition is this, that we have a concept of independent judiciary. When we look for the concept of independent judiciary, then broadly that simply means that judiciary should not only be independent in terms of its functional abilities from executive, but it should be independent in terms of its thought process as well. And this is a proposition which lies across board. It matters the least who is a political party in power, what the government is doing. But the fact of the matter is the court should not only look like an independent, court should act like an independent institution as well. The second proposition is the government may be right, the government may be wrong, but excessive legislative or excessive executive deferral is per se bad. There is a clearly identifiable limit where courts have to act. And if there are the circumstances when the courts are required to act, the court must act. If for one reason or other court fails to act, then the court has to be perceived as an institution of critique. And all are sociologists here, and if I look at the society, then there is a perception that we criticize the government often, we criticize the people often, we criticize the leader often, but we never criticize the court because there is a hangover of contempt of power. So that precludes us from looking into a domain of court. So court by and large is an institution which is perceived in society to be an iconoclast or an ivory tower. There is a requirement that the society as a large should revisit its own notion of the court, and court should also get reviewed by the citizenry in general. So these are the 2 broad propositions, one of judicial independence and second of executive or the legislative deferral. With this, I have 2 caveats to add. One caveat is, please note, the government of a day, irrespective of the party in power, almost behaves in identical terms. There may be students of political science here, or the sociologists themselves will appreciate that self-aggrandizement of power is a norm for every government. Why does this happen? This happens because the government or the executive has 2 functional arms. One functional arm is the permanent executive, which you call bureaucracy. The second functional arm is the political executive. So to a vast extent, the political executive is not very much susceptible to subversion of civil liberties, except few. But the permanent executive, once have a nod of political executive, subverts the individual liberties the most. So I will come to it little later when I will move on to my submissions. The second caveat which I am making is that when I allege the aggrandizement of power or a character of power, then that is not indicated to a government A in a state A or a government B in a state B. When I talk of this, I talk of governmental power in general, which you will find has its own narrative or feature everywhere. I will also explain that when I would move on little ahead. So with this, let us begin with certain thought-provoking things. The first one is why there is a need of civil liberties. I will just interrupt here. There is a technical glitch. Just make it. Should be visible. Yes. Thank you. So when we talk of civil liberties, then firstly we should look, why do we need civil liberties? What is the nature of civil liberty? Who has granted civil liberties to us? So here the point is that civil liberty is not the gift of any government. Please note, it is not a gift of government. It is not the gift of constitution. It is a constitution which is a gift of civil liberties. We require constitution because we have parted our liberties to be exercisable by government. So the whole discourse in law with regards to civil liberty is the control of government. So the spirit of constitutionalism lies in the spirit of controlling the government. The more better way you control your government, the more better society you would become. But that doesn't mean that the government should not be allowed to act. There are clearly demarcated areas where government can act uninfluenced by any judicial dictum. But wherever courts are under constitution called upon to limit the governmental power, and if the court failed themselves, then they have not only failed themselves, they have failed the constitution, they have failed the citizenry of this country. The second aspect is, please note, there is a distinction between nationalism as a concept and democracy as a concept. Nationalism can have veritable meanings, but democracy can't have. What we understand with term democracy is well entrenched, well meaning. It is no longer a nebulous expression. So wherever we find a difference between conceptions of nationalism and conceptions of democracy, please make sure that today's nationalism lies in sound democracy. If person A has a view X, person Y has a view X dash, and X dash is so antithetical to X, then it is a duty of Y, or it is a constitutional liberty available to Y to propagate his view so profusely that X as a view could no longer be an acceptable view. So everybody, you can't, it is this way that you can't restrict the things by an abrasion means. You can't restrict the things by imposing certain moral sentiments or moral values. If the things are legitimate, not in terms of something which appeals you, or which is something which appeals to a party in power, or which appeals to a government in power, or which appeals to a bureaucrats in general, then that is not the only permissible view. The permissible view has to be there. Now the next point is, what is the role of court? Having said all this, let us examine what is the role of court. The role of court is not to sanctify a particular idea. The role of court is not to grant protection to a particular individual by a particular figuration. The role of a person A dash. Am I audible to everybody?
हाँ, आपकी आवाज आ रही है अनुराग, आ रही है आवाज, आपकी आवाज आ रही है स्पष्ट.
Thank you. Actually screen got blurred, so I got. So the idea is the court is supposed to afford protection under law to each and every person who is similarly placed or similarly circumstanced. Now you people often feel that at a particular point of time the court has become a capitalist court, or at particular time the court has become pro-poor court. So we have seen both the things. If you look at the development of jurisprudence from 1950, when our constitution in fact was inaugurated, to till 2019 or 2020, we have seen our Supreme Courts in various shades. The first 10 to 15 years of our Supreme Court was a conservative court. But when I say conservative court, it was not conservative for any individual or a particular segment. It was conservative in terms of giving or determining the scope of rights. So if the rights are in favor of person X, it will go ahead. If it is contrary to something, then no overarching consideration can come in way. It was like this, that when most of the distinguished professors know that when the constitution was inaugurated, there was a quest for socialism. And that quest for socialism ultimately led us to the agrarian reforms. There was a right to property under our constitution. So there was an apparent conflict between zamindari abolition and right to property. So we find that for 10 years, initial 10 years, the court has protected right to property jealously. It was such a protection afforded by the court that most of the social legislation has gone down. They have been declared unconstitutional. And it was such an impact that Prime Minister, then Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who stated, if I may use the expression, out of frustration in Parliament, saying we have made a munificent constitution, but it was purloined by the lawyers. So that was one Supreme Court. Move on to an emergency era. We find the same Supreme Court becomes so passive to the government that the governmental brutality have passed the muster. The courts have given excessive executive deferral. And on most of the time, the court has given excessive legislative deferral, knowing it fully well that there is no distinction between executive and legislature when there is an emergency under proclamation. So that was a period of crisis for the court. Court have failed us. The same court has failed us, which was so vigilantly guarding a particular right in 50s. Post-emergency, we have seen a new avatar of courts. Such an avatar of court which has created a court-centric sentiments in the mind of people. The credit goes to PIL, public interest litigation, as you all know. When a citizen was given a right to peg a social interest before court or a social action in litigation before court, then court has by and large become a center of democracy. There were criticism then as well that court have over the period of time overstretched its limit. The same court, please note, the same court which has virtually alleged to have abandoned its role in emergency is accused of excessive intrusion in the executive domain. So the crux of the matter is the perception towards courts, depending upon activity of court, changes over the period of time. Now please examine. We have seen all the three facets of court: a conservative court, an over excessive executive deferral court, and a judicially activist court. With this, please examine what is the position of court today, how the courts have responded to this crisis. Now, three things directly comes to my mind. The first one is, when the lockdown was announced, the courts have also locked down. The health is paramount consideration, but justice is no less. And therefore, I often say that judges can be quarantined, lawyers can be quarantined, but you can't quarantine the judicial process. You can't quarantine justice. Therefore, in some other space, the court must act. In patchy form, the courts have acted. But what were the biggest challenge when the court were called upon to address, and whether the court have addressed those challenges or not? Please look at it. The first challenge was the challenge of migrant laborers. I have no hesitation, being a student of Supreme Court, in saying that courts have literally failed us. Except high courts, the Supreme Court have failed us. They have failed us not because they have not done anything. They have failed us because they have not done things timely. And when the courts have taken up the matter jealously, that was a time when a criticism from bar, criticism from civil society have cropped up. And the courts, to my mind, thought that the social legitimacy or the moral of judicial pronouncement would demean their credibility if they would not act promptly. So they have acted, but how far they have acted, to what extent they have acted, whether their activity was satisfactory, I leave it to you to judge. But I have a vast negative impression of that. Now, please note, there is a famous distinction between compelling state interest. Whenever there is a requirement to give executive deferral, then we import a doctrine of compelling state interest. I personally feel, having seen the jurisprudence developed on this subject, that over the period of time, this phrase compelling state interest have been read conveniently. there can't be any compelling state interest against protection of migrant laborers. There can't be a compelling state interest in ordering the court to all state government and central government by issuing a writ of mandamus to ensure that there should be a available ration to everybody. What is the point for a host individual to travel from Maharashtra to state of Uttar Pradesh? If they are in the state of Maharashtra, they are as much a citizen of this country as they are in the state of UP. So broadly, it is a duty of the state of Maharashtra to make sure that they are not dying in hunger. They are the one who runs your economy. They are the one who votes you. Still, they were at that point of time probably not conceived to be a political capital for the government in power, and therefore they have been treated not like a citizen, but like a slave. So this is something where the court ought to have intervened. Fortunately, the Karnataka High Court intervened timely. And I see one silver lining where there is a narcissus, there is a silver lining as well. You see, the high courts have acted promptly at so many places, and this has to some extent ameliorated the circumstances. But the things are getting perception centric. I have no hesitation in bringing to fore the Gujarat model. What happened in Gujarat? In Gujarat, there was a judicial intervention, an activist judicial intervention. But that judicial intervention could not have been taken further. Compositions have changed, so perception or the nature of order has changed. So idea is to say that somewhere, when I say this, I do not say that the extraneous considerations have crept in. All I am saying is that there is a paranoia in giving excessive weightage to compelling state interest rather than guarding civil liberties jealously. So with this, I would conclude saying that the legitimacy of judicial opinion or the legitimacy or the moral of judicial pronouncements depends upon how better you subserve the cause for which you stand. So this is the sole test which should determine or which should evaluate the judicial impact on social order. And there are two agents of a state. One is the political text and another one is the jural text. We all know the political text is something which the executive and legislature are concerned with. So they have their own sense of legitimacy. Their sense of legitimacy lies in election, vote, power. But so far as the judicial text is concerned, their sense of legitimacy lies in giving shape to constitutionalism. So they are consciously and rightly made unelected, unlike the US model, so as to make sure that they remain independent in its functional and in its formal form. I have seen that there is a time for court to make over its image, and this pandemic has blurred that image severely. Before crisis of public faith in judiciary gets deepened, the courts and its agents, its stakeholder, must make sure that it come back to